I like especially the small-town cemeteries of America, where the children come for picnics and games, as we did when I was growing up. Wandering among the stones on our own, with no adults about, to regard the mystery and inevitability of death on its terms and ours. I remember we would watch the funeral from afar in a hushed awe, and I believe that was when I became obsessed, not with death itself, but with the singular community of death and life together. And life's secrets, life's fears, life's surprises. But it is the graveyards of Mississippi which are the most moving for me, having to do, I believe, with my belonging here. They spring from the earth itself and beckon me time and again. The crumbling stones of my people evoke in me the terrible enigmas of living. In a small civil I came across recently, the markers stretching away in a misty haze, it occurred to me that most of these boys had never even had a girlfriend. I have found a remote graveyard in the hills with photographs on many of the stones, some nearly 100 years old. The women in bonnets and Sunday dresses, the men in overalls, the short and simple annals of the poor. I am drawn here to the tiny grave of a little girl. Her name was Fairy Jumper, and she lived from April 8, 1914 to January 16, 1919. There is a miniature lamb at the top of the stone, and the words, "A fairer bud of promise never bloomed." There are no other jumpers around her, and there she is, my fairy, in a far corner of that country burial ground. So forlorn and alone that it is difficult to bear.
By lyrically describing all the cemeteries he has visited, Morris is gently trying to persuade the reader to adopt his viewpoint. But does the persuasion work? As with all essays, it depends on the reader.
One of the major ways of persuading is simply what's called ethos, the character of the essayist. And so we have this idea of Willie's character as a very likable person. We learn about him, we see that he, whether we knew anything about him before or not.
But William Vesterman of Rutgers University has a much different opinion of the essay.
But he seems to be trying to persuade me to look at death in a calmer and wiser and more humorous way than I presumably have already, and that he has already achieved that view, and I don't like it. He makes death into a matter of the picturesque, whether of sentiment on tombstones or nice little settings in rural towns, and that's not what death means to me. It's a great horror, and I am not pacified in my horror or made more bravely to face it by having him go around Oxford and look at tombstones.
Although the effects of a personal essay may be different for several readers, the writer's viewpoint should be easily interpreted.
That's what it's meant to do. Say, here's the kind of person I am, here's the way my mind works, this is the way I get from subject to subject when I'm reflecting to myself.
Sitting there now in the dappled sunshine, a middle-aged man and his middle-aged dog, gazing across at the untenanted terrain awaiting its dead, I thought of how each generation lives with its own exclusive solicitudes. The passions, the defeats, the victories, the sacrifices, the names and dates and the faces belong to each generation in its own passing. For much of everything except the most unforgettable is soon forgotten. And yet, though much is taken, much abides. I thought then of human beings on this cinder of a planet out at the edge of the universe, not knowing where we came from, why we are here, or where we might go after death. And yet, we still laugh and cry and feel and love. All that we can know about those we have loved and lost, Thornton Wilder wrote, is that they would wish us to remember them with a more intensified realization of their reality. What is essential does not die, but clarifies. The highest tribute to the dead is not grief, but gratitude.
Whatever our own views of cemeteries, this essay's descriptions of tombstones and epitaphs helps us see Morris's viewpoint. And it's a viewpoint written not with the fingers, but with the whole person. Willie Morris's life and work are inseparable. As a journalist, novelist, and essayist, he writes mainly about his experiences in the South. He has written, "I go back to the South physically and in my memories to remind myself who I am, for the South keeps me going." But if readers see Mississippi in his pages, they also see glimmers of the rest of the world, for his writing reflects universal thoughts and concerns as well.
I know I always cared about writing. I was writing sports for the Yazoo City Herald in Mississippi when I was 12 years old, and I would do a baseball game and I'd quote Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn.
This attraction to writing took Willie Morris from his hometown, Yazoo City, to the University of Texas at Austin, to Oxford University on a Rhodes Scholarship, to New York City, where he lived for 20 years. He's since returned to Mississippi to write.
Well, I don't like to call myself a Southern writer, and a lot of the writers I know who are Southerners don't either. It's obvious that we respond to a mutual continuity here. The past, the storytelling tradition, the King James Version of the Bible, the memory of sitting on front porches before the television era and hearing the older people telling tales. But we're much more American now.
The tales Morris tells, which appeal to readers in Mississippi and beyond, are written mostly in nonfiction.
I've been drawn to the essay form in a lot of the things I've written. I may have something to do with my newspaper background, but it's quite a clean, flexible, and incisive form. An essay is particularly adaptable to a specific moment in a writer's life that he wants to come to terms with right then and there, which he wants to share with his readership, with his audience.
Much of what Morris shares with his readers are personal experiences which reflect larger concerns. In his critically acclaimed autobiography, North Toward Home, his personal history parallels the changes in the South and in America in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
I divided North Toward Home into three parts: Mississippi, Texas, and New York. I was living in New York in the 60s, running a magazine.
For a writer with such a strong sense of place, New York was a big adjustment.
The first time I saw a man lying prone on the concrete, blood trickling slightly from his nose, I bent over and asked him if he was all right, and he moaned a little, and I went into a restaurant and phoned the police to report his distress. But after a while, like the others, when confronted with such a sight, I'd keep going too, though always a little guiltily, wishing a cop would come by soon. I came to feel it perfectly natural, this isolated callousness of the city dweller. Anyone who expected valor or compassion in everyday acts in a monstrous American city in these times expected too much of human nature and would sooner or later be disappointed. The cops became the guardians of benevolence. They were our salaried Samaritans.
Exploring these personal experiences have played a big part in Morris's writing, as evidenced in a love that transcends sadness.
I've always been obsessed with death, but unlike like many people, I think also this is quite Southern. I've always felt at home in cemeteries. I find a person can absorb the passing of the seasons, history, and memory in cemeteries.
But with so many memories, how does a writer narrow down the field?
You have to pick and choose. I think to emphasize those things that are important to this concept that you have of conveying a feeling or a memory or an idea. I have discovered after many years as a writer that so many of these problems take care of themselves in the actual writing. I personally cannot conceive of living without writing. It's a great prop, a pillow, as William Faulkner said in his Nobel Prize address. It's also a prop and a pillow in the most personal way, because you have all these thoughts and these memories that are churning inside of you, and you've got to give them some kind of form for the sake of your own survival.
Writers' thoughts and memories often take the form of nonfiction. Newspaper columns, magazine articles, television documentaries. Much of what I enjoy is a direct descendant of the essay. And of course, I'm happy to curl up with a book of those as well, whether it's the master Montaigne or modern practitioners like Willie Morris. Because I find that essays, whatever the topic or style or tone, essays not only entertain, they make me think. I may not agree or accept the author's assertion, but essays make me consider new ideas and new viewpoints. One writer said of the essay that it turns round and round upon its topic, exposing this aspect and then that, proposing possibilities. Possibilities. The essay and all literature offers us a world of them.
Literary Visions is a production of Maryland Public Television.